Thanks everyone for joining so much. We have a huge number of attendees today on call. And today we're really speaking about SEO. And I'm breezing through the attendee list and I can see a bunch of familiar names. I can see a lot of companies who've raised big rounds. I can see a bunch of public companies as well. So I'm super excited we're all here to join and discuss SEO. I actually opened this to initially only 300, but we ended up having over 500 attendees, which is pretty crazy, including a bunch of VCs, a bunch of VC-backed startups, and some really interesting companies in the fintech and SaaS space. So thank you so much for guys joining. I kind of want to pre-qualify a bit about why myself and Victor will be speaking about SEO. My name's Amin. I run growth for New Optima. And what that is we are a digital marketing agency inside a house of brands. So the house of brands is Alf Green Group. And we started around 3 years ago with Europe's largest CBD marketplace. So we created a CBD marketplace, which was at the time extremely difficult proposition. There were no Facebook marketing channels that were working. Google wasn't working, all because of compliance issues around advertising the CBD keyword, which meant that we had to become very internally good at SEO. And at our peak, we had around 20 full-time content writers churning out hundreds of thousands of words a month, all focusing on bringing in qualified SEO traffic to our site. Out of this, we ended up ranking above CBD brands on our marketplace, which then resulted in a lot of CBD brands reaching out to us, asking us for help in how to run SEO, how to do growth marketing, which was the creation of our agency arm, which is a New Optima. On call today, we have myself as the head of growth. I'm an ex-physicist who's turned to become a marketer. And we have Victor, who has been spending the last 15 years doing SEO, which, funnily enough, I think only SEO has only existed for like around 14 years. So he was doing it way before it was even a thing. And we also have Alexi, who is the CEO, who's also on call too. So from all three of us, you're getting like a really unique view on SEO. You're getting the view from Victor of 15 years of experience. Then you're getting myself as a very data-driven physicist, thinking of it as in terms of ROI, metrics, deliverables. And then Alexi is thinking about it in terms of fundraising and how do you use this to woo investors and also to project growth future. Awesome. So to kick it off, we've worked on a bunch of sites. This is kind of where the experience all comes from. And so a lot of the learnings we're trying to keep general in today's session so that they can be applied, across SaaS, fintech, B2C, B2B, biotech, professional services, the whole range and so on. So the SEO Accelerator, in terms of agenda, over the 4 sessions, we've separated it into 4 unique parts. And the reason being is when we were running single SEO sessions to the likes of Founders Factory and various other smaller accelerators, the feedback we generally got was, this is really useful and valuable information, but there wasn't enough time for us to go into the details. So each of these sessions is an hour long, focusing on strategy, on content, on technical, on backlinks, all to make sure that the you guys out there have as much learning as possible in how we operate and how we go. I'm just going to make sure that we guys can use the chat. I've got a feeling no one else can use it. Panelists can chat. Okay, everyone should be able to chat now, by the way. Could I get like a yes in the chat if you guys can? There we go. Awesome. Sorry, that's a lot of yeses. Okay. We are free. Yeah, okay. Cheers. Okay, awesome. Sweet. I'm keeping an eye on the chat the whole time. Also, we have Rob, Isabel, a bunch of our team members all also on chat to answer any questions as we go live. We're going to be stopping every so often, just so I can get like a yes or that makes sense. And there'll be a few polls, so I'm going to try and keep it really engaging. So today's session is super about strategy. I'm really going to avoid any mention of keywords and content and backlinks and technical as much as possible when it comes to SEO. Okay, so session one, high level CEO thinking, everything you need to plan, model, and execute a top 1% SEO strategy. So Alexia and I were talking about this a couple of days ago. We were trying to figure out how best do we structure this session. And we've decided to go in a 3-part. So we'll talk about timing. When is it right to invest into SEO? Part 2, how do we model SEO from a financial perspective and communicate that back to investors? And 3, once you know it's time and you are able to get the backing from a financial body or investor, how do you go about even executing in terms of team, in terms of structure, in terms of hiring? So to kick it off, I'm setting a poll live. I would love for you guys to answer that. And if you can't hear it, send me a message, let me know. There we go. Sweet. Okay. Nice, about 50% have answered. Awesome, 75%. I'll give it like another 20 seconds. Okay, we're at 80%, we're hovering. Can I get like a few more? Okay, I think we're good there. So I end the poll, I'll share the results. So I think everyone can see this. But yeah, so like 20% of people have not started SEO, 32% are considering it, and then 50%, which is quite a lot, and a lot more than I expected, are committed to and implementing. So it's super interesting. Cool. So let me give you an example in terms of when is it right to invest into SEO and how we can think about the growth channel as a whole. So when let's go back to September 21, there was a big rush of companies called Amazon aggregators. I don't know if anyone knows about it or has heard about the big rush, but essentially VCs funded a lot of companies who are out buying Amazon native brands. So these guys actually raised, $1 billion, $2 billion, etc., to go out and acquire smaller Amazon businesses and add them into their portfolio. Now, this happened in a very short space of time. There was, say, around 90 plus aggregators have all raised money in the last year. There's been about 3 billion pumped into the industry. And as a result of lots of VC funding, and as a result of needing to grow quick and show results, all the aggregators started bidding on the FBI aggregator keyword. So they were looking for Amazon brands to buy, and Amazon brands were thinking, okay, look, there's 90 of them out there. Let me Google FBI aggregator and offer to sell my brand to each one of these guys. And that's exactly what happened. So a keyword that, let's say, over a year and a bit ago had, zero traffic, zero awareness, maybe it was like for 10 cents a click, suddenly has become a very, very competitive keyword. And everyone's paying $5 to $7 a click, just for the appearance to be, at the top of Google. And this is the short-term mindset that was invoked by the players in this SEO space. And that's how they were thinking about things, because they needed to acquire companies quickly and show results. And it's very easy to turn on Google Ads. I could right now go and turn a Google ad on and be bidding for this keyword. Now, the opposite way is when we saw this space, we thought, okay, this is crazy. Competition has increased like absolute mania, and pay-per-click is an auction-based idea. I.e., if someone else bids more than me, I have to bid more to appear on listings. So in the long term, it's clearly inevitable that the cost of PPC for this type of keyword is just going to go up higher and higher and higher. And as a business that, let's say for us, we've only raised $4 million in comparison to the billion raised in one day, we would never be able to compete on that level. So we wrote an article, listing out the top aggregators, which was what search intent required. And we literally saw within a few weeks, we were ranking #1 on Google. And so just that one piece that cost us $300 to write has probably saved us just under 12 grand of PPC costs, which are being bidded on by a bunch of Amazon tools and a bunch of Amazon aggregators. Which leads you to a bigger question about bottom funnel keywords. I mean, who's going to win out long term? Is it us as the long-term thinkers, or the short-term thinkers, all these names over here, who are bidding for the same keyword, trying to appear in front of the consumer at the right time? So this is the difference in long-term mindset thinking between SEO and PPC. And in terms of when is it right to invest into SEO, well, for us, it was right straight away because we couldn't compete on the PPC. But for the aggregators who needed to show results, they needed to invest into PPC first and SEO a second. However, that's obviously drastically changed as time has gone on. And this graph, and we're going to see a lot of graphs today, mainly because that's how I think about things. But this graph shows how your customer acquisition cost varies as a function of time across two different channels, and we can consider PPC versus SEO. So the PPC that you're paying today for, let's say, Google ads or Facebook ads is not going to be the same PPC cost that you pay tomorrow. It's inevitably going to go up due to two main factors. One is competition. It's so easy to turn on an ad right now, and you can fully expect that every other day there's a new competitor bidding for your keyword or competing to your audience. And two, law of shitty click-through by Andrew Chen, which basically says, your advertising, your opportunity to be in front of your consumer is going to diminish, and the click-through rate will fall over time, and you need to innovate and you need to change. Yes, Neil, this is live. From an SEO perspective, though, you can think of the customer acquisition cost as a capital expenditure. It's something that's really expensive from an SEO right at the beginning, but over time, it asymptotes to zero. And the reason this is because every new customer you get makes it cheaper to acquire the next customer. For example, I spent $300 on that article that's now ranking in position 1. The first lead that filled out, let's say a pop-up or a type form, cost me $300. Then the second one comes, that means that each one cost me $150. The third one comes, it's $100 each time. And so you'll quickly see that every additional lead I get through SEO actually makes it cheaper, but every additional lead through PPC actually makes it more expensive. So this is one very specific way to think about when is it right to invest in SEO from an SEO versus PPC perspective. Does everyone get that? Can I get a yes? Can I get a, that makes sense in the chat? Cool, got a yeses. Awesome. So this is only one way to think about it. And I showed you a very specific example of an Amazon aggregator, but that isn't always relevant to you. But in some ways it is, because in every industry, there's an incumbent that's willing to spend a crazy amount of money to get the click. And a lot of people, when Alexi emailed out, what's the one thing you want to talk about? A lot of responses were, hold on, how do I compete as a small player against an incumbent? Let's call it HubSpot or whatever it is. And the answer is, well, if it's not via SEO, it's definitely not via PPC. The costs are just too crazy high, and they literally bid on those keywords to price you out of the market as opposed to letting you in. So it's a very defensive strategy for them, and they know it. They know there's no attribution. They know there's no revenue there either. So yeah, think about your own industry. Think about those dream keywords and see who's ranking for those keywords and who's bidding for them. And you'll have a very quick idea of who's got VC-backed funding and who's got a lot of money, and who's being intelligent about when to invest or when not to invest. So this example was showing you just two channels, PPC versus SEO. I saw an awesome graph the other day on LinkedIn, and it was comparing yield potential versus usage majority. And what that means is comparing how effective a channel is versus how long you use it for. So I'll very specifically pull out an example because it is quite a confusing chart. But let's look at Google Ads. Google Ads, when they start, you're not getting any gain from it. If anyone's tried to run Google Ads, in like the first few weeks when you try to run an ad, you basically get it all wrong. You don't target the right keyword, you don't have the right headline in your ad, you're not saying the right thing. And so those first 4 weeks to 8 weeks, you're learning loads. You're testing different keywords, you're A/B testing different headlines and texts to see what gets you the most potential. And you keep doing that and you keep doing that. And you get to a point, and let's call it at the top of this curve, where you suddenly become really confident. You're like, oh my God, this certain headline where I'm offering something for free and I get the email address and it converts in the back end is working really, really well. And I'm making a lot of money. And then someone in marketing or someone in the CEO goes, look, okay, look, up the budget. This is awesome. We've cracked growth. Let's go, let's fly. You do that, and then two things happen. One, you cap out. And when I say you cap out, I mean, there is only a certain number of search volume for a certain keyword. So you cap out and you say you were bidding £3 a click and you try to bid £4 a click. Google will take your money, but they won't give you anything extra out of it. So you hit a cap. The second thing, and this is the main thing I wanted you to think about in terms of marketing, is the competition clock on to what you're doing. The competition see a Google ad. They're like, this guy's clearly been running it for 8 weeks to 12 weeks. So he's clearly making money from it. Let's just copy what he's doing now. And so they're skipping 12 weeks of trial, skipping 12 weeks of your budget spent and just copying your end result. And what happens is if both people are saying the same thing, you're both as ineffective as each other. And then the yield potential drops off. And the only way it stays flat in the long term is if you keep innovating and you keep testing. So the person who tests, the person who spends the budget trying a new idea is the guy losing money, and he occasionally gets some gains, but the competitor comes along and just keeps copying you each time. And that's why Google Ads becomes a less efficient channel over time. The only way to combat this is to think about channel layering, which is, okay, if my Google Ads is going to become ineffective in say 6 months to 12 months, or it will hit a cap, what am I going to do in my marketing mix to save that from happening? So it could be anything right now, whatever channel you think is working for you right now. Fast forward it 6 months, and does it still work then? Or has the competition figured something out and made it more ineffective? And the more honest you can be with that question, the more pragmatic you can be about choosing your future channels. Another example, if you look at outbound sales, it's always really good yield potential. That's why, Y Combinator and everyone in the startup world will tell you, look, you need to speak to your customers. And that's because, yes, speaking to your customers has the most potential for results, and it always will do, except that it's very, very expensive. The one curve that's going upwards and staying up is podcasts, SEO. It probably should have another comma and say organic. Organic, brand, SEO, podcast. These are the sort of channels that the more you do, the more you get out. It's the sort of channels that in the long run, all big businesses are built off of. All big businesses are not built off Google Ads. Then sometimes they are built off outbound sales, but they're definitely not all built off Google Ads or sales promotions, tactics, and hacks. Everyone got that? Is that a yes? Sweet, awesome. So let's try this exercise out for a SaaS company. So I'm like, in my head, I'm thinking about a SaaS company that's making, that's selling a 10K average contract value product. And you probably know who those companies are because they're the guys that, DM you on LinkedIn, because outbound sales are so expensive. So they start an outbound sales straight away and they're making money and they're speaking to their target audience. And then they may, for whatever reason, they, not my company, they hit a cap in terms of, look, they've run out of their audience on LinkedIn or whatever happens. Someone internally goes, oh, look, why are we trying to force people to listen to our messaging? I'm only converting 0.5% of outbound messages into booked meetings. Let's run Google Ads and capture people at the bottom of the funnel too. Completely logical decision. So they do this, and that's your yield potential out of it. In the short term, it will work. In the long term, it has limited gains. And then generally SaaS companies go, hold on. If we got another idea, why don't we do SEO? Why don't we capture people that have pain points before or around the usage of my product? And this is why SaaS for SEO is such a huge industry, or SaaS companies speak so much about SEO, is because it truly does scale with the volume and with the market. If the market continues to grow and you're a SaaS company with amazing SEO, you will just continue to grow. And every time a VC comes in or a competitor comes in, and a VC funds a competitor, they're only growing the market for you. And so if you're sitting on position 1 in Google, for example, on the FBA aggregator keyword, you're just going to rise with the tide. Conversely, if you're the guys bidding on PPC, your PPC cost gets more expensive. So going back to the big question, when is it right to invest into SEO? The short-term answer, the short answer is, it depends on how short-term and long-term mindseted you are, like as a ratio. Like, are you 40% short-term, 60% long-term? What's that balance for you? Sometimes you need to be short-term. You need to get sales today, so you can, I don't know, raise your round, or you need to hit some sales numbers, whatever that reason is. And being short-term is important. But long-term, if you want to build a huge profitable business, you need to find an organic channel that will continue to grow the more you pump into it. So into a next part, which is, I've talked about when is it right to invest in SEO, and I feel like I've given an answer, it depends, which unfortunately is true, and it really does depend on your business and how you feel you are in sort of product market fit and where you feel you are in strategy. The second bit we wanted to speak about was, how do you model SEO? How do you think about it financially? How do you communicate it to investors? How do you get buy-in? And the way to think about it is probably with 2 case studies. The first case study being Alpha Green. So our very first product or brand was alphagreen.io, the CBD marketplace. We raised the pre-seed round, or Alexi raised the pre-seed round, purely based on his network in family office, in VC. We were able to raise, say, $500,000. We then raised the seed round, or the next couple of seed rounds, say around $2 million, purely off the back of leading indicators. Because the time between our pre-seed and our seed was only 6 months, we didn't have enough time to start showing revenue metrics. And we were still trying to work out, where does our business lie in this field of, cannabis and CBD. And so for us, it was really important to communicate to investors that, look, we are growing, and you need to look at leading indicators to see the growth and how that will convert into revenue down the line. And SEO is a great way to communicate that, because what you see is, you'll see your traffic's increasing, and you can start applying conversion rates and hypothesizing a future that ideally looks rosy, or ideally gives you confidence that you could execute on that. So one really good example is a company called Levels. I don't know, has anyone heard of Levels in this chat? Probably not. Interesting. Okay, so Levels is a health company. It's like a biotech wearables, and it's basically a continuous glucose monitoring app or product. So it's basically what diabetics patients use. They measure their blood glucose, and they are able to measure the blood glucose levels, and their research suggests, or very good research suggests, that it's very linked or correlated with your longevity, or how long you live for. So Levels did a really good job in their pre-seed. I think they raised a couple million, and then they raised their seed, which was 12 million, about a year later. And they raised it with 0 revenue. There was no sort of revenue numbers on their block, but they instead raised off the back of a 45,000 people waitlist, which they grew for 1 year. And they had 3 main growth channels. They had SEO, influencer and partnerships, and PR. So they were really good at putting their message and their point of view into the world, which enabled them to essentially raise a 6 times the bigger round. And the reason why I give this example is, they did a very, very good job of leveraging leading indicators for revenue, for market growth, through SEO. So they may have showed this curve off, and this is a growth curve. of 0 to 30K traffic in 1 year. And they probably showed off the fact that, hey, look, they got to 0 to 45,000 people on their waiting list, which is pretty incredible for a new company. So that's what they did as a way to leverage leading investor indicators to win investors. We did a similar idea. We didn't execute it as well as Levels did. But in hindsight, it's a pretty good execution. So I showed you these growth curves. The general question we get next when we're asking, okay, how do I model SEO is like, how do I model the growth of my SEO? And the short answer is, it is super, super difficult to model SEO. The only reason we're able to sometimes model SEO, and I say sometimes quite strictly, is that Victor's worked on, our head of SEO has maybe worked on 100 to 200 plus, SEO projects over the last 10, 15 years. So we have a sort of intuitive feeling or pattern finding exercise. And we found that it's really hard to communicate. You need to have faith in the channel and see if it will work or not. So for, I'm choosing this specific example, which is a cybersecurity company, and this is a growth curve we showed them. And I wanted to show a very specific example where the traffic was tiny, like the traffic is only 1,200 monthly visitors. And I wanted it to be in contrast to the 30,000 or the 75,000 we're seeing for Levels over here. And what the point I'm trying to mention is the traffic number is like, it's relative. It's not a huge value. It's all about, are you capturing the right consumer? So for this 1,200 search traffic, if you were to run Google ads for that, you're paying between $30 and $6 a click. It's incredibly, incredibly expensive in this niche. So what that means is to get to 1,200 clicks, it's going to be 1,200 times 30. Probably if you wanted to bid on that, you paid 36,000 a month on PPC costs. It's absolutely crazy. So the first thing you do anyway is you model a growth curve out. Once you model a growth curve out, you can apply a conversion rate. When you apply a conversion rate, you can get to, like, say, a number of qualified leads. And this was a super conservative estimate. And then you can start to then measure, what's my cost per lead? You divide your SEO costs by the number of commutative leads you get, and you can start showing that your cost per lead falls over time. Now, again, for the cybersecurity niche, getting a cost per lead under £1,000 is like incredibly attractive. Getting a cost per lead under £500 is probably very, very attractive. And so if you're able to do this for your business, you can create a good business case internally for investors or for internal users. But all of this rides off the fact of these growth curves, and it's incredibly difficult to predict them if you don't have the experience, or you're struggling to know where your budgets and how much, how many organic words of content you need to write to get a certain amount of traffic. Is everyone okay with that so far? Ooh, sweet. So we've done two parts, which is we've discovered when is it right to invest in SEO, when is it wrong to invest in SEO. We then discussed, how do I model SEO? How do I prepare investors? How do I think about the cost behind it? And the next piece is discussing, okay, say I believe that I want to do SEO and I think in the long run it does help me grow. How would I structure my team around it? So very quick poll while we're here. So I'll launch this one now. Everyone can see that. The question is, who is responsible for SEO execution at your company? So if you're not doing SEO, this probably is one where you have to opt out. But if you are, I'm super curious who's responsible for managing it. Cool, 50% responded. Cool, 70%. Okay, super interesting. We're coming out with the main person responsible at your current company is your marketing manager, followed by the CMO or the head of SEO. Sometimes it's a content writer who's managing all of SEO. And only in, say, 10% of scenarios, it's an external SEO agency, which is super interesting. Ooh. Awesome. So in terms of SEO, I will describe 3 scenarios where you can understand how you could structure an SEO team. So the first way you can structure an SEO team is you build it out yourself. And the way we build our own SEO teams out, we start with a head of SEO. In our case, it's Victor. Again, when we choose a head of SEO, or we want to work with the head of SEO, there's sort of a few decision-making factors you want to have. And you kind of want to work with somebody who's worked on multiple projects. The more projects they work on, the more data they see, the more patterns they can recognize. And SEO is as much a science as much an art, and a lot of it is pattern recognition. They ideally have built a team out, and ideally they're technically savvy. So if I move this forward, for example, the head of SEO actually manages 3 different groups of people. And you'll notice quite quickly that this is backlinks, content, and technical. The backlinks person, the person who's managing and writing the content, and the developers who are fixing the technical parts of SEO, but also the people that are publishing the content to your site, publishing your blog posts, publishing your category pages, so they are ranking as an e-commerce store, so you appear for good middle funnel content. So your head of SEO manages your backlink specialist, your content editor, and your dev publisher. And most of the time, the head of SEO is passing down information. And when they pass information down into the backlink specialist, might go out and find a website which would happily do a guest post. They'll be working with a content editor to acquire that piece. When the head of SEO sees a technical issue, they're the ones going to go to the dev and publisher saying, look, your schema, the schema org's not set up correctly, or whatever they need to say, please do this, and they give the task out. And then the final person involved is the content writer. And the content writers are working with the content editors. And there's a lot of back and forth between here, because the content editor is checking the work and making sure it meets the specifications outlined by your internal requirements and also outlined by your head of SEO. So that's a general team structure. And generally, it's quite expensive. Your head of SEO, if they've worked on multiple projects, is expensive. Your editor is the gel between the whole team. If you notice, the head of SEO is not in the middle, it's the content editor, which is a really interesting point to note. So it's almost more important that you have a very strong content editor. And then you have backlink specialists, devs, and content writers all supporting. Then you could argue, okay, I could build out my team in-house. And there definitely is a time to build out a team in-house. We find generally companies build out in-house teams once they are about to raise like another round, maybe like late seed, or they have very good head of SEO internally. Generally, that's when we see it happen, but it usually happens later for companies. What mostly happens is you have a marketing manager or a CMO or a head of content who basically manages a relationship between an external SEO agency. And it's really, really important that if you ever do SEO, you don't hand the ropes over completely. An SEO agency, and us being one at one point as well, or us being one out, we like to be held in check by their marketing managers and CMOs. And the reason being is because it means that they can make sure we're rating content for their ICP or for their ideal customer persona. We don't know your customers as well as you do. And so it's really important for that marketing manager. Their whole thesis around interaction should always be like, how does this help my customer find me? How does this help my potential persona find me? And that's generally a cheaper way, but yes, you do lose control on the writing, for example, but can save you a lot of headache and a lot of time. And that's generally where people stop, but there is a third model. And this third model we see with around 20% of our clients. And the third model says, okay, you could also have in-house content writers from the client. So the marketing manager manages an SEO agency, and then the marketing manager starts the CEO starts to hire in-house content writers. And the SEO agency acts as the person giving tasks to the content writers and training up that team so that they can eventually take over in-house. This model actually is really good because it means you're able to pump out more volume. And two, you're building a function out internally, which will be able to help you take over from the agency in the future and reduce those costs. So that's generally the payoff you have between, three different ones. You can pay a lot and do it all yourself, probably get the cheapest option and outsource, or have this hybrid option where you have an agency, but you also use your in-house content writers to support your team. So we've done 3 big sections, which was, when is it right to invest in SEO? How do you model SEO and prepare investors? And then the ideal SEO and team structure. Whilst we're here, and before we continue on, do we have any questions from anyone in the audience? Cool. Super good questions. Awesome. I'm going to try and avoid specific SEO specific questions, and we'll save that for the next couple of sessions, but I'm going to take the strategic ones. So for example, how do we make sure the external writers of the agency understand very specific topics about our product? Like, super good question. There is an element of 2 things. You can either do it 2 ways. One, you could educate your agency to be able to understand your products really well. And what that usually takes the form of is say a 1 hour or a 2 hour session with your agency team, and you're discussing with them and you're teaching them all about your product and about your ICP and about your persona. And the more you can teach them, the better. The other model is where you just take the content and you fix it, let's say, or you restructure it so that it fits your ICP. So there are 2 really ways to do it. Even better is if you can have your agency learning as you give them edits. So a lot of the time, if you have a very particular product where, look, we're not super expert on, but we could become experts on in, let's say, a month, we will have multiple calls with the client to understand what's going on, and they will be reading their feedback in huge detail, and there'll be a lot of back and forth on the first few articles as we learn that piece. Look at other questions. Okay, so maybe I can talk about this. Let's talk about the traffic numbers just very quickly, because I see a few questions on that. That growth curve was sort of based on like very loose, like, okay, we think if it's a very high competition niche, it'll be harder. If it's a very low competition niche, it'll be lower. And the $500 for a warm lead, yeah, that's for a potential sale of 100K, not 10K. So it could be worth it, and it should be worth it for that type of client. The typical conversion from traffic to leads, I get that question quite a lot. If you want to just apply a baseline number, go from anything from 0.5% to 1% when you want to start modeling stuff. It really does change depending on the piece of content. For example, I had a bottom of funnel content piece that was converting at 40% into leads, like absolutely crazy. But if I average that across all the traffic I get, it probably comes out to 0.5% to 1%. So it really does vary. Nora, what level of understanding would you recommend internally before hiring an agency? This is a super good question. I'm actually super against people that hire agencies or companies that hire agencies without understanding the basic principles of SEO. Because I think that's where a lot of people get burnt, and they get sort of promised the world in terms of SEO, and then they go out and they get kind of screwed over because they didn't know when or how to call out the agency on, like, you're not using the right leading indicators, or you're not correctly reporting back, or you're not getting the right ICP. So I think this series, we designed it internally to be enough that you could probably go out and hire an agency. So after these 4 sessions, you should be good. Awesome. A lot of these other questions are quite specific. I'm going to keep them most of them for later on. A lot of these are content related questions. So we have a content session on I think it's session 2 or 3. And we'll be specifically going into how do we think about content, how do we write content, and what are the leading indicators to show if SEO is working from a content perspective. I want to have a quick 2-minute brief on Claimer. So for context, we are running this series. We haven't taken any money to run this series. It's purely off our relationships with some other cool SaaS companies. Again, when we worked with the Claimer, it was a super cool scenario where we were introduced to Adam, the founder, and we had a bunch of R&D claims. And we did a huge claim for like 120K, and which the eligible was 43K, and Claimer were able to win that back for us. So that was a super cool scenario where we did some really cool work with them. And then as a favor to say like, thanks so much, we're going to promote them in the webinar. But highly suggest if you have an R&D claim, work with Claimer, they're super good. We also work with C Legal, Cedars, and Velocity Juice for various bunch of other services, which we'll get through in the later sessions. Cool. While we're here, I'm going to open up to some more questions, but I have a feedback form, which I'm going to send out to you over chat. It'll be really good if you guys could fill that out ahead, so then we can go on our next session and make sure it's improved for you.